Hello, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing my 25.6 jungle tier list. So if you have content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There are two big things to cover this patch. One is the addition of Neferi Jungle. She obviously had a bit of a kit reshape this patch and has come out really, potently as a jungler. She has also obviously been hotfix nerfed alongside Gwen, who is also doing really well at the moment. We saw big Darius nerfs, we saw nerfs towards Yorick, Master Yi, we saw buffs towards Xin Zhao, Jarvan, we saw a buff towards Lilia, Kha'Zix, Poppy, and then there's some other shift arounds, and a lot of things have changed in the jungle this patch. It's been a pretty big meta shake-up. So let's cover the changes. The D-tier is going to consist of the same champions. We lead off with Skarner, who is in a really bad spot at the moment. We know he is going to be reworked, well, maybe not reworked, but shifted about in power relatively soon. This champion is in one of the worst spots I've ever seen a champion be in for solo queue, while simultaneously still being one of the best champions you can play in competitive play at the moment. This pick is obviously very much built around his utility, even more aggressively than the likes of Sejuani, and has really obviously been pro-gated because of it. I think this champion needs some level of CC ripped out of it, whether that ends up being compensated in the form of more damage, like AP ratios, maybe making some other builds have viability. He's just not maintainable in his current state, and at the moment for solo queue he sits as a D tier pick. If you're very comfortable on Skarner and you're smurfing to an extent, even then you still might not want to play Skarner, but he does do well in the hands of people who can play him well. It's just not a great pick for average solo queue. Never a pick I'm really going to recommend for climbing. He's not as high agency, and it's very much built around his utility focused kit. Same goes for Maokai, another pick I really wouldn't recommend for solo queue. He is also a champion mostly built around his CC, another competitive main tier at the moment. I wonder if at some point they just go, this is it, and completely rip out Maokai jungle from being a thing, kind of what they did with Rel jungle, for example. But for the moment, he's obviously very pro-gated and also a very bad solo queue pick. Gragas is just bad. There's no way around it. He's probably the weakest of the more traditional junglers. It's almost like they've given up trying to support Gragas jungle, which is a bit unfortunate, as I know there is a player base for it. I think he could do with a buff, maybe he could even get away with it in terms of top lane. I don't think he's breaking any sort of boundaries in top lane at the moment, so there is room to give him some power. Maybe they could even give him some jungle modifiers. It would be nice to see some sort of change come through to this champion. Silas is another pick which they kind of for a while decided they were going to start supporting. They obviously removed the punishment on his Q explosion. That's now 100%. He has no jungle demodifiers, but he's not really that great in the jungle. They changed Silas more recently, taking away some of his AP burst potential and then giving him back some power through health ratios on his W. It did something to kind of shift his builds around. Now you're encouraged to go for a proto belt for jungle Silas, though it really hurt him. It hurts his snowballing nature, and he just hasn't really found his footing since then. In the case of Rengar and Nidalee, these are perfectly good picks if you are comfortable on them. They are really bad picks to play if you're not comfortable. They are never champions I'm ever going to recommend for the average player, unless they are breaking boundaries in terms of how powerful they are. They are very hard to pilot, two of the hardest champions to pilot in the entire game. Qiyana, I think is a decent jungler at the moment. She's also very hard to play, and a pick I would never really recommend for the average player. But if you are comfortable playing Qiyana, she's always a flex option there for you. In the case of Talia, she got over nerfed for jungle. She's just not performing that well at the moment. This is more like a C-tier option. Sejuani sits as a C-tier option, kind of similar vein as Maokai Skarner, except from she's been out for 10 years, and I have had a better time balancing her so she can be viable in solo queue. They still haven't gotten it right in 10 years. She's still weaker in solo queue than she is in competitive. There was a period back along where Sejuani wasn't seeing any competitive play and was a decent solo queue jungler, so there is room to obviously change Sejuani a bit, but for the moment she's a pro-gated champion. You can still find success on her. I don't think she's as egregiously pro-gated as your Maokais and the Skarners, but still gonna struggle compared to other options. Rek'Sai. So Rek'Sai could probably be bumped up to the B tier. I'm holding off on it at the moment. People are beginning to start to shift over away from Stridebreaker to your Youmu's and the Titanic Hydra. Obviously Stridebreaker back along got hit pretty heavily. Rek'Sai's champion's really struggling at the moment. I think this pick could do with just being overpowered, maybe, to actually support some of the play rate. She can be very frustrating to play against. I don't know if Riot have any plans for her in the like short term or even in the long term, but I think this pick is in a pretty dire spot at the moment. Obviously, the loss of like Prowler's Claw from the previous like Mythic era really just hurt this champion a lot, and she's never really truly found her footing since then, outside of like some very abusive cases of like Parma health regen Rek'Sai top lane, which they ended up nerfing down, for example. Ivan's going to drop down, so this might surprise a lot of people, but Ivan for solo queue is not doing as well at the moment. He still clears incredibly quickly, that is one of the biggest strengths of the champion, but he's relatively low agency. He's obviously more of an enchanter, and for average play, he's just not a pick I would really recommend at the moment. Ivan, for the most part, has to be blatantly overpowered to really get a lot of value out of the low and mid elo bracket. He still performs well in high elo. Like, if you are a very comfortable Ivan player and you want to play him in high elo, it's a perfectly fine champion. But for the average player, just not really going to recommend this pick at the moment. Just don't think he has the agency to quite enable you to climb as quick as some of the other options on this list. Moving on. Elise is going to remain as a beta option. Obviously, she got nerfed a couple of times and adjusted because of her support power. She's landed in an alright spot. Not probably over nerfed for jungle, unfortunately, but not bad by any means. Like, you can still definitely find success on her. She's obviously a pretty hard to play champion. For support, she's still very solid option, and if you are comfortable playing her there, then you should still be able to play her there. And the same goes for jungle. I just think she sits as more like a mid to low beta champion. She's obviously, yeah, main prohibiting factor is she's just difficult to play, and yeah, she's going to remain here for a while, I imagine. In the case of Zed, he got buffed more recently, and it helped him. He's now a B-tier jungle option, also an egregiously fast jungle clear. If you can get that down, this champ can be really powerful. The one lacking factor of this pick is it doesn't have hard CC, and that can really hurt as a jungle option at the moment. Rammus, I don't like. He's conditional. He's incredibly low elo skewed. He has very little high elo translation. They just need to buff full mail. That's the main like thing here. Like, full mail is a bad item at the moment, and Rammus and Malphite for the most part suffer from it. Rammus could do with a buff, or they could buff full mail. Right now, this pick is just a champion I wouldn't really recommend. Eve is fine. Eve is playable. They buffed her a couple of times more recently, combined with like some rune buffs. She has found her footing, and she sits as a solid beta option. If you're comfortable playing Eve, you should find success. If you're not comfortable playing Eve, I wouldn't say she's a necessary LAN at the moment, but she's always nice to have in your pool as a pick. Lee Sin is obviously the most popular jungler in the game again, now that Darius has been nerfed. This champion, very hard to play, but I mean, has a huge mastery ceiling. Like, you can play so many games of Lee Sin and like continue to learn more and more things about how to like min-max the champion. He sits as a beta option. I think this is probably where he's balanced as an option. He is obviously very powerful in other regions. For the West, he's fine. He's a fine solo queue pick, and if you're comfortable playing him, you can play him. Hecarim is doing a lot better at the moment. A lot of it does come from Dantes, who is popularizing, I should say. It's not fully taken over. Youmuu's Hecarim. Youmuu's Hecarim, I've always kind of like seen the data like promoting it as like an option. It wasn't really as recommendable because it was obviously very limited, but now a lot of people have started playing it and people have realized it's very strong. Like, it looks like the way to go on this pick, and I think that is probably going to bump him up to the A tier at some point. I don't think Hecarim's ever really been bad. He's just a bit more skill expressive than he has been in the past, and that requires a decent amount more games on him to really find success. I'd say he sits as a high beta option, or mid to high beta option at the moment. If Youmuu's Hecarim takes over, though, he'll probably get bumped up to the A tier. Zyra is fine. I think if you're comfortable playing Zyra, she still clears incredibly quickly, and it's about what you do in those downtime windows, which really make value of the champion. If you're not comfortable playing Zyra, though, there are many other options you can lean towards. I think she is just a solid support to jungle flex AP option. Talon sits as a beta option, once again, played by a lot of OTPs. If you're very comfortable on it, it can be a very successful pick. If you're not, then you don't need to play it at the moment. I think Talon jungle is a relatively cool pick. When it's balanced, it's not too frustrating to play against, and it can be like, it has like trade-offs in terms of its power. Right now, I'd say, yeah, he sits in a pretty balanced spot at the moment. A very solid beta option. If you're very comfortable on him, you can make him work. Zac, solid tank jungler. I think Zac and Rammus are I want to say leagues apart. Obviously, they're 4 champions apart here, which is kind of unfortunate. I could probably do with pushing Zach a bit further to the other end of the B tier. But this champion, if you are comfortable on it, can be a good, successful way to climb with. He obviously doesn't have as much agency as some of the like the higher damage champions in the jungle, but for a tank, he is definitely one of the better options at the moment. If you are looking for a more translatable into elite pick, if you're looking for something easy, I'm always going to recommend a Mumu and Nunu to an extent, except from that has like some caveats with it. But yeah, Zach, this is a high B2 option. I think he's good if you're comfortable on him. Echo got buffed more recently. He's doing a lot better. The rune buffs also helped him, and he sits as a pretty solid B2 option. If you're comfortable on him, you should be able to find success. Shaco also benefited from domination tree buffs. He is a solid B2 option. Udyr, not doing as well at the moment. Could probably be bumped down to the lower end of the B tier. He obviously has been, well, he was like Fiddlesticks for a while, where he was kept intentionally strong in the jungle to support some of the player base. I think he still has a player base. He's just not as strong at the moment. He really suffered from a bunch of nerfs he received at the end of last season, and he's kind of there as a pick. I think if you're very comfortable on an OTP of the champion, you should find success. If you're not, you'll probably struggle quite a bit. He requires a lot of games to really get comfortable with. Kindred and your Belveths are, I'd say, your slightly better elite options at the moment if you are looking for like a translatable to elite pick. These champions can be really good. I wouldn't really recommend them, but if you have them within your arsenal at the moment, they are very, very acceptable, sufficient champions. Graves is fine. Once again, he's like there as an option. It's not like a Graves meta at the moment, but he is a good pick if you're comfortable on him. He could honestly be buffed and people would probably be okay with it, but he can be frustrating when overbearing a lot of times because he can just output so much damage in a lot of these situations. Vi is unfortunately starting to lean more towards these like pro-jailed picks. I hope they don't nerf Vi in such a way where she ends up suffering really heavily in solo queue. I think Vi is a cool champion to have in solo queue, but she's beginning to, start. I mean, she's already been for a while seeing a lot of competitive play, especially in the East. I believe she's a very big, like, pick there. And yeah, they might end up nerfing her at some point. I hope they find a good spot to put her in, but she's like decent for solo queue whilst not being a competitive mainstay. She sits as a B2 option at the moment. I don't think she's bad. I wouldn't say she's particularly amazing for climbing solo queue either, though, at the moment. Some of your power farming options include your Karthuses and your Shyvanas. I don't like Shyvana that much as an option. I like Karthus as an option. I think Karthus is is a very high skill ceiling, and if you can pilot and clear really well on this champion, he's a very powerful jungle pick. Shyvana just doesn't have that level of skill expression. She's pretty limited in what she can do, and I think that really hurts the champion, where in a tier list where she should definitely be close to the S tier, because this is where she should be the strongest as a option to pick up. So the champions dropping down include the likes of Jax, Mordekaiser, and Teemo. I overrated Teemo after he got buffed. He should probably sit towards the high end of the B tier. He's still a fine option, and if you're comfortable with him, he is still a better low elo pick. Mordekaiser has gradually faded out of the jungle. He is now the least picked option on this list, which is unfortunate. I really liked Mordekaiser as a jungle option. I don't think it is bad per se, but it's not exactly amazing either. I think it is a flex option at best now. And Jax also more of a flex option. I also thought Jax would do a lot better with the buffs he received back along. He's still a really good answer to some of those auto attack based junglers, but he still clears really slowly, and that can definitely be deducted from the strength of the champion, so he will also be dropped down to the B tier. Poppy. I had Poppy originally marked up as going up to the A tier. I'm now a bit hesitant on that. I don't think she's actually an A tier option. I think she's more like a high B tier option. I think she's decent now. Like, you can use her quite comfortably as a counter pick, and she was already good as a support and top lane flex option. I think there's a chance she takes over competitive play, like, over time. Right now, though, I think sits as a high beta option. She does have good utility. She has good damage. She scales a lot better now and has lost some of that power early game. And yeah, I'd say she sits as a high B, low A. I might bump her up next patch depending on how I feel like the rest of his patch goes. Trundle sits within the beta. He's just limited by the fact that he's very linear, can only be played in certain things. Has a pretty poor clear speed, and it's kind of reliant on like Tiamat to actually clear camps. I think these are very clear weaknesses of the pick, and that kind of prohibits him from being higher. When once again, Trundle, very easy to play champion. One of the easiest champions to play in the game. Should probably be a mainstay in the A, close to even S tier options. Moving on to the A tier then, we're going to lead off with Kha'Zix, who got buffed quite heavily this patch. He's now a very solid AD assassin option. He can compete with the other higher options. He's also another very good counter to Xin Zhao, which is definitely doing a lot better at the moment. And I'd say he is a very deserving A tier option. Pantheon obviously has been talked about a lot more. He is a 4-way flex pick as well. Very solid in the jungle. Like, jungle is probably his most... it's probably the role you can just generally blind him in the most and find success. Top lane and mid lane require a lot more counter picks, and bot lane tends to require very aggressive lanes. But if you are just, very comfortable with champion, you want to play him in the jungle, I think he is a great A-tier jungler at the moment. Mundo, very easy to play, great scaling, very, very low elo skewed. He falls off quite aggressively the higher rank you go. But the buffs to him more recently, combined with Warmog's buffs this patch, if you opt into it, are nice for him. And he is a solid A-tier pick. Relatively decent clear speed as well now. Viego, I could possibly bump this champion close to the S tier. I think he is a high A-tier option at the moment. Like, your Viegos and your Wukongs are still very stable options. If you're comfortable on them, you should still very much find the same level of success. And yeah, I'd say they're good AD options. Not the easiest to play. I think Xin Zhao and Jarvan are still 2 picks I'm going to recommend over them. And Nocturne I still have higher than them for solo queue at the moment, especially because these champions kind of got nerfed because of their competitive power. But they're still very solid options for solo queue at the moment. Briar, only really good around this elo bracket. She is a mid to low elo skewed champion. She struggles massively in high elo, but if you are comfortable playing Briar and you enjoy the champion, she is a great mid elo pick. She should be a great way to climb to master, but you'll struggle master plus. That is where the champion really begins to quite aggressively fall off. Diana got nerfed, ended up weaker. She is considerably weaker, that is noticeable, but she's still a very solid option, still a high A tier pick. In my opinion, definitely a champion where if you're comfortable on her, you can play her and find success at the moment. The other picks in my A tier include Fiddlesticks and Volibear. In the case of Volibear, very simplistic play pattern, very easy to pick up and play. Not quite as good as some of the S tier options at the moment. He did get nerfed because of his top lane power back along, where he took away some of his E strength. And yeah, I'd say he's still a very easy to play champion. It's very linear, cookie cutter playstyle, and should be a good way to just pick up and get some LP. In case of Fiddlesticks, he's mostly played by OTPs. If you're comfortable on him, he should be a very solid way of climbing. If you're not comfortable on him, then you're probably not going to play him. But he's always a very solid AP champion just to have within your arsenal. If you can find the right games to play Fiddlesticks, he can be a very 1v9 champion. Yorick, I'm going to drop towards the low end of the A tier. This pick could probably be bumped down to the B tier as well. There are some like fringe A, fringe B tier picks. Yorick got nerfed again this patch, and it was meaningful. He lost a lot of damage on his E to jungle camps. They are going to rework the champ. Well, I said rework. Like, they're going to change the champion quite aggressively in 25.7. So that is definitely something to watch. But right now, I'd say he sits to like a low A tier option. The hype around the pick has kind of died as well. It's really unfortunate. Like, Darius kind of got away with it. I think Darius sits as still an S tier pick now, but Yorick just ended up taking another hit, and it's really sad for the champion. Fortunately, he is getting some love in the next patch, so that is at least one thing going for the pick at the moment. Some champions dropping down. I'm dropping Kayn down. I think Kayn is a high A tier pick. I just don't think he's quite the S tier champion, which I would recommend. Like, if people only played Red Kayn, I think Red is perfect for middle and low elo. Blue Kayn becomes better the higher up you go. Blue Kayn's obviously hard to pilot. I think he's an high A tier pick. You could consider him still an S tier pick if you are playing primarily Red Kayn mode. I think it is still the generally the stronger of the two. Other picks here include Master Yi, who I'm also dropping down. He probably sits as more like a mid A tier option now. The nerfs this patch were meaningful and effectively took him down a peg. He did receive some crit modifier again on his Q. He needs more. Like, it's just not enough. Crit Yi is still not great. And yeah, he lost a decent amount of his power. The other picks here are, actually, I think all the rest of these I'm going to leave within the S tier. I'm going to lead off with Amumu because I think Amumu is the lowest of the S tier options. He's still very easy to play. Still does a lot of damage. Still has huge amounts of CC. He's weaker. He's not the strongest iteration of Amumu we've ever seen, but he's still a very easy to play champion, and that really does enable me to recommend him when he has so many things going for him. The biggest weaknesses are obviously he's very vulnerable to invades. If you fall behind, he's not quite as high agency, and the higher elo you go, the more the champion does suffer against better players. Nunu, still an S tier option at the moment. Really like the kit. I think if you can really abuse the strength of the early game re-gank patterns, then you can really find a lot of success on this champion. If you're not comfortable playing Nunu, he's not mandatory. He's just a nice champion to play at the moment. I think he's in a pretty solid spot. In the case of Gwen, she is performing really well in the jungle at the moment. She was already kind of a hidden OP jungler, but now she's been like adjusted. She's one of the best top lane, or she might be the best top laner in the game at the moment, and she's one of the best junglers in the game at the moment. Both Gwen and the Fury will probably get follow-up nerfs in 25.7, so if you enjoy playing Gwen, you should play her now in the jungle. If you don't, I don't think she is mandatory as much as top lane. I think top lane she's basically mandatory to be playing at the moment if you are able to play her. But jungle, you can kind of get away with playing certain things into her, but she does clear really well. She does a huge amount of damage, and a lot of her weakness was her early game, and they've obviously given her some power there. So I think this champion's definitely doing a lot better at the moment. A very deserving S tier pick. Lydia, the E-buffs were really big, and she finds herself once again as a very solid S-tier option. Great into tankier compositions, which don't have great lockdown. She can really thrive in those environments. If you're looking for an AP pick, I think all four of these options are very solid champions at the moment. In the case of Jarvan and Xin Zhao, they got buffed this patch. They were already in my S tier. The buffs were relatively minor. They remain as S tier options, just slightly higher S tier options. I think if you're looking for some AD picks, these two are very easy to pick up and play. Require about 5 to 10 games, and you should be able to get good results out of them. Practice them a bit, take them into solo queue, and you should be able to really find your way throughout the ranks. In the case of Warwick and Nocturne, these champions are pretty mainstay S-tier picks. They have been for a long time. Nocturne always been really powerful with like the level 6 ultimate, the Stride Breaker pairing. You can play him lethality. It doesn't perform as well, but there are games where it can definitely function. Still a very good AD pick, especially for solo queue. Nocturne is one of the best junglers for solo queue. Always kind of has been because of just the power of the ultimate. In the case of Warwick, the adjustments he received towards the end of last year really helped him, allowed him to really thrive as a jungler. He's been a good jungler since. He hasn't really picked up enough in popularity to really like deserve a nerf, but he's always been there as a very solid option. He probably sits towards the middle of the S tier, but still a very solid pick. Darius is going to get dropped down to the S tier. Champion is still very, very powerful and clears really well, but the 100% bleed they took away, like 300 to 200%, is meaningful. It does hurt his clear meaningfully, and that will be noticeable power loss. You're not going to have as much free time around the map. You're going to end up having to hit camps a bit more to like enable yourself to kind of move away from them, and yeah, that's a lot of time lost. So I think the champion does drop from the S plus to the S tier, but don't worry, we have a new S plus champion in the Fury, probably the strongest jungler on the patch. The strongest jungler on the patch, I should probably say. I don't think there is competition at the moment. She got hotfix nerfed. It was mostly what looked like focus on mid changes, but jungle in the Fury is still incredibly powerful. We actually saw it in the LPL today, so if you want to watch some professional player or like a pro player play in a Fury, you have a game now. And yeah, the champion looks really strong. The data suggests that it is just blatantly overpowered at the moment, and it is my pick of the patch. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.